I was laughing with my coworkers when the crystal wine glass exploded against the marble floor. Blood dripped from my split lip as 200 corporate executives watched in stunned silence. But what the company's ice queen said next would expose a secret that changed everything I thought I knew about power, loyalty, and justice. This is my story of how one slap at the annual company gala revealed a truth that no one saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma, and 6 months ago, I was invisible. I worked as a junior accountant at Morrison Industries, one of those massive corporations where people like me blend into the background. I had a tiny cubicle on the 15th floor, a salary that barely covered my daughter Lily's daycare, and dreams that felt impossibly far away. Every morning, I'd take the same crowded elevator, walk past the same marble lobby, and disappear into a sea of gray suits and quiet desperation. The invitation arrived on a Thursday that started like any other. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my supervisor, Janet, dropped a cream-colored envelope on my desk. The annual Morrison Industries Gala was legendary, a black-tie event where the company's elite celebrated another year of record profits while the rest of us served drinks and smiled politely. I'd never been invited before. Hell, I didn't even know they invited people from my department. "You're kidding," I whispered, staring at the elegant script that spelled out my name. Janet shrugged, looking as confused as I felt. "Apparently, Mr. Morrison specifically requested you be added to the guest list. Lucky you." Lucky me indeed. The gala was in 3 days, and I owned exactly 0 dresses suitable for rubbing shoulders with millionaires. That weekend, I spent my grocery money on a simple black dress from a discount store, hoping it would be enough to help me blend in with people who probably spent more on their shoes than I made in a month. Monday night arrived with the kind of autumn chill that makes you want to stay home with hot chocolate and bad television. Instead, I found myself standing outside the Grandview Hotel, watching limousines drop off women dripping in diamonds, and men who looked like they owned small countries. The hotel's ballroom was a masterpiece of old-world elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors so polished they looked like mirrors, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city skyline that took my breath away. I'd been to company parties before, but nothing like this. Ice sculptures shaped like the company logo stood guard over tables laden with champagne and hors d'oeuvre that probably cost more than my weekly salary. A string quartet played softly in the corner, while servers in white gloves weaved through conversations about stock options and vacation homes in the Hamptons. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray and tried to look like I belonged, even though my discount dress felt like it was screaming imposter to everyone in the room. That's when I saw her, Victoria Sterling, the company's vice president of operations and the closest thing Morrison Industries had to royalty. She was everything I wasn't, tall, blonde, and beautiful, in that effortless way that comes from a lifetime of privilege. Her dress probably cost more than my car, and she wore it like armor, surveying the room with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Victoria had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who crossed her path. I was admiring the view from one of the massive windows when I heard footsteps behind me. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice was warm, familiar in a way that made me turn around with a smile already forming on my lips. Standing behind me was James Morrison himself, the CEO, the man whose name was on the building, the person who signed my paychecks. But he wasn't wearing the formal mask I'd seen in company photos. Instead, he looked relaxed, approachable, almost normal in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Mr. Morrison," I managed, suddenly feeling like a deer in headlights. Thank you for inviting me. This is incredible." He smiled, and for a moment I forgot that this man was worth more than most small countries. "Please, call me James. And you're Emma, right? From accounting?" The fact that he knew my name sent a jolt of surprise through me. In a company with thousands of employees, I was nobody special, just another face in the crowd. "I am," I said, still trying to process the surreal nature of the conversation. I have to admit, I was surprised to get an invitation. His expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. "Well, you deserve to be here more than most of these people," he said, gesturing toward the crowd of executives. "Hard work should be recognized, don't you think?" There was something in his tone, something that suggested he knew more about my work than a CEO should know about a junior accountant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Before I could respond, Victoria Sterling materialized beside us like a perfectly dressed storm cloud. "James, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet but with an edge that could cut glass. "I've been looking everywhere for you. The board members are asking about the quarterly projections." Her eyes flicked over me dismissively, taking in my discount dress and drugstore makeup with the kind of assessment that left no doubt about her verdict. "Victoria," James said, and I caught something in his tone that suggested their relationship went beyond professional courtesy. "I was just talking with Emma from accounting. Have you met?" Victoria's smile could have frozen champagne. "I don't believe I've had the pleasure," she said, extending a manicured hand that felt like shaking hands with a marble statue. "Victoria Sterling. And you are?" "Emma Martinez," I replied, trying to match her confident handshake despite feeling completely out of my depth. "I work in the accounting department." Victoria's eyes lit up with what I initially mistook for interest but quickly realized was something much more predatory. "Oh, accounting. How? Essential." The way she said it made it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in social warfare. Victoria asked innocent-sounding questions that were designed to highlight exactly how much I didn't belong. Where did I go to college? Community college. What did my parents do? My father was a mechanic, my mother worked at a grocery store. Did I live in the city? I lived in a tiny apartment 40 minutes away because it was all I could afford. Each answer seemed to amuse her more than the last. James, to his credit, tried to steer the conversation toward safer ground, but Victoria was relentless. She had identified prey, and she wasn't about to let me escape without making her point crystal clear. "It's so refreshing to meet someone so grounded," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "It must be nice to live such a simple life, without all the complications that come with real responsibility." I felt my cheeks burning, but I forced myself to smile. "I find fulfillment in honest work," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "There's dignity in earning your place rather than inheriting it." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I immediately regretted them. Victoria's expression shifted from amused condescension to something much more dangerous. "How interesting," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than if she'd shouted. "Tell me, Emma, do you really think you've earned your place here tonight?" James started to intervene, but Victoria held up a perfectly manicured hand. "No, James, I think this is an important conversation. After all, we want to make sure everyone understands the standards we maintain at Morrison Industries." The ballroom seemed to grow quieter around us, or maybe that was just my imagination playing tricks as my heart pounded against my ribs. Other guests had begun to notice our conversation, drawn by the subtle shift in Victoria's tone and the way James had gone very still beside us. I realized I was trapped in a moment that could define the rest of my career, possibly my entire life. "I think everyone here earned their place," I said carefully, trying to diffuse the situation. "We all contribute to the company's success in different ways." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Oh, sweet Emma, you really believe that, don't you? You think your little spreadsheets and budget reports put you on the same level as people who've dedicated their lives to building empires?" The circle of observers was growing larger now, drawn by the scent of confrontation like sharks to blood in the water. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, social media posts already being composed about whatever drama was unfolding. These people thrived on spectacle, and I was about to become their evening's entertainment. "I never said I was on anyone's level," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady even as my hands began to tremble. "I just believe that respect shouldn't depend on how much money someone has." Victoria's eyes glittered with malicious delight. "Respect," she repeated, savoring the word. "You want to talk about respect? Let me tell you about respect, little girl." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume and see the cruel satisfaction in her eyes. "Respect is earned through achievement, through building something meaningful, through proving that you belong in rooms like this. It's not handed out to every little nobody who manages to squeeze into a bargain basement dress and crash a party meant for her betters." The words hit me like physical blows, each one calculated to humiliate and diminish. Around us, the crowd had grown silent, watching our confrontation with the kind of fascinated horror reserved for car accidents and natural disasters. Some looked entertained, others uncomfortable, but none seemed inclined to intervene. This was Victoria Sterling's world, and I was just visiting. "You're right," I said quietly, and Victoria's smile widened, thinking she'd won. "I don't belong in your world. I work for my money instead of marrying into it. I shop at discount stores instead of having personal stylists. I take the subway instead of riding in limousines. But you know what? I sleep peacefully at night because I've never had to step on someone else to feel good about myself." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, fury, and finally, cold calculation. When she spoke again, her voice carried across the ballroom with the authority of someone used to having her words treated as law. "You pathetic little nobody," she hissed. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I could have you fired with a phone call. I could make sure you never work in this industry again." "Victoria." James's voice cut through the tension like a blade, but she was beyond hearing warnings now. Her mask of sophisticated civility had completely slipped, revealing the entitled bully underneath. "Don't you dare defend her?" she snapped at James without taking her eyes off me. "This little parasite needs to learn her place, and if no one else will teach her, I will." That's when she raised her hand. I saw it coming but couldn't believe it was happening. Not here, not in front of 200 of the city's most powerful people, not at a corporate gala where careers were made and destroyed with handshakes and whispered conversations. Victoria Sterling, vice president of Morrison Industries, brought her hand across my face with enough force to send me stumbling backward into a nearby table. The slap echoed across the ballroom like a gunshot. My wine glass flew from my numb fingers and shattered against the marble floor, sending crystal fragments skittering across the polished surface. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the crowd transfixed. Suddenly, everyone was moving at once, phones appearing, conversations erupting, the careful choreography of the elegant evening dissolving into chaos. My cheek exploded in pain, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. Tears sprang to my eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the crushing humiliation of being struck like a misbehaving child in front of so many people. Victoria stood over me, her chest heaving with fury and satisfaction, her perfectly manicured hand still raised as if she might strike again. "Maybe now you'll remember your place," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom. "Maybe now you'll understand that there are consequences for forgetting which side of the glass ceiling you belong on." The crowd pressed closer, some pulling out phones to record the aftermath, others whispering among themselves about the scandal they'd just witnessed. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare and find myself back in my tiny apartment, safe from the cruel entertainment of people who saw my humiliation as just another amusing story to share at their next dinner party. But I was frozen there, blood trickling down my chin, tears streaming down my cheeks, trapped in a moment that felt like it might last forever. That's when James stepped forward, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked truly dangerous. "Stop," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the room go completely still. He looked at Victoria with an expression I'd never seen before, disappointment so profound it was almost physical, anger so cold it made the marble floor seem warm by comparison. "James," Victoria said, her voice suddenly uncertain as she realized she might have pushed too far. She was disrespectful. She needed to be taught a lesson about her place in this company. But James wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me, and in his eyes, I saw something that made no sense at all. Recognition, concern, and something that looked almost like love. "Actually," James said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom with an authority that made everyone freeze, "you just slapped my wife." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Victoria's face went white as marble. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers that rippled through the ballroom like wildfire. I stood there, blood still trickling from my lip, trying to process what I'd just heard. Wife? My mind reeled as I stared at James, searching his face for some explanation that would make sense of this impossible moment. "What did you say?" Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd. Her perfectly composed mask was cracking, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. James stepped closer to me, his movement protective and deliberate, placing himself between Victoria and where I stood, trembling beside the shattered crystal. "I said you just assaulted my wife," James repeated, louder this time, his words carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "Emma Martinez Morrison. We were married 3 weeks ago in a private ceremony." The crowd exploded into chaos. Phones were pulled out everywhere, flashes going off like paparazzi at a red carpet event. Board members were pushing through the crowd, trying to get closer to hear better. This wasn't just corporate drama anymore. This was the scandal of the decade. My legs felt like they might give out. "Married? 3 weeks ago?" I opened my mouth to protest, to tell everyone there had been some terrible mistake. But James caught my eye and shook his head, almost imperceptibly. There was something in his expression, a desperation, a pleading, that stopped the words in my throat. Whatever game he was playing, whatever lie he was telling, he needed me to go along with it. Victoria was backing away now, her face cycling through disbelief, fury, and dawning horror. "That's impossible," she stammered. "James, what are you talking about? We've been together for 2 years. We're engaged. The announcement was supposed to be tonight." She held up her left hand, showing off an engagement ring that probably cost more than my annual salary. "We're engaged," James corrected coldly. "Past tense. That ended the moment you showed your true character tonight." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what looked like a folded document. "I've been waiting for the right moment to see who you really are, Victoria. Congratulations. You just gave me all the evidence I needed." The document he unfolded was a prenuptial agreement with Victoria's signature at the bottom. But as he held it up for the crowd to see, I could make out words that made my blood run cold. Morality clause, grounds for termination, character assessment. Victoria's face went ashen as she realized what she was looking at. "You set me up," she whispered, the words barely audible. This whole thing was a test. James's expression was granite hard. I needed to know if the woman I was considering marrying was capable of basic human decency. "You failed spectacularly." The crowd was pressing closer now, sensing that they were witnessing more than just a slap. They were watching the complete destruction of one of the most powerful women in corporate America. "But we had plans," Victoria said, her voice rising to a near shriek. "The merger with Sterling Industries, the board position, everything we built together." Her desperation was palpable now, her carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. James shook his head slowly. "We built nothing together, Victoria. You saw dollar signs and a path to power. I was looking for a partner who shared my values." That's when he turned to me, and his expression softened completely. "Emma, I know this is overwhelming, and I know you have every right to be angry with me for putting you in this position. But what I told everyone is true in every way that matters. You are my wife. Maybe not legally yet, but in my heart, you have been from the moment I realized who you are." The crowd fell silent again, straining to hear every word. I was still reeling, still trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the last 5 minutes. "I don't understand," I managed to whisper. "James, we just met tonight. I don't know what you're talking about." He stepped closer, close enough that only I could hear his next words. "November 15th, 2019. You were working late at Morrison Industries, staying after hours to finish the quarterly reports because you wanted them to be perfect. I was in the building that night, walking the floors, checking on things. You didn't know who I was. I was just some guy in jeans and an old sweater." The memory hit me like a physical blow. 4 years ago, I'd been new to the company, desperate to prove myself worthy of the job that barely paid my bills but represented hope for a better future. I remembered that night, staying until nearly midnight, my eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets when I'd encountered a man in the hallway who looked lost and tired. "You were crying," James continued, his voice gentle now. "I asked if you were okay, and you told me you were fine, just tired. But then you saw that I looked exhausted too, and you did something that changed everything for me." The memory was flooding back now. offering the stranger a cup of coffee from the break room, sitting with him in the empty office while he told me about feeling overwhelmed by life, by expectations, by the weight of decisions that affected thousands of people. "You listened to me for 2 hours," James said, and I could see tears gathering in his eyes. "You didn't know I was the CEO. You just saw someone who needed kindness, and you gave it freely. You told me that everyone deserves compassion, that we're all just doing our best in an impossible world. You gave me hope when I was ready to give up on everything." I remembered now, the quiet conversation with a stranger who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. I'd never seen his face clearly in the dim office lighting, never thought to ask his name. He'd just been someone who needed to know that he wasn't alone. "You never told me who you were," I whispered. "I wanted to," James said. "But by the time I worked up the courage to find you again, I realized that what we had shared was too pure to complicate with corporate hierarchy and power dynamics. You saw me as just a human being, not as a CEO or a billionaire or a prize to be won. I've been watching your career ever since, making sure you got the recognition you deserved, the promotions you'd earned." Victoria let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob. "This is insane," she said, her voice cracking. "You're going to throw away everything we have for some nobody from accounting? Some little girl who makes $30,000 a year?" The contempt in her voice was withering, but it no longer had the power to hurt me. I was beginning to understand something much bigger than corporate politics or social climbing. "That nobody," James said, turning to face Victoria with an expression of complete disgust, "showed me more authentic love and kindness in one evening than you've shown in 2 years. She saw me at my lowest moment and chose compassion. You saw a woman you perceived as beneath you and chose cruelty. The difference between you two isn't money or status, it's character." The ballroom had become a pressure cooker of tension and excitement. Board members were whispering urgently among themselves. Social media was exploding with live updates from the guests. This wasn't just a corporate scandal anymore. It was a story about love, kindness, and the true nature of power that would be told and retold for years to come. Victoria made one last desperate play. "The board will never accept this," she hissed. "They invested in our relationship, in the merger between our companies. You can't just throw that away for some Cinderella fantasy." But James was already shaking his head. "The board invested in my leadership and vision, not in my personal life. And as for the merger with Sterling Industries, well, that was never going to happen anyway." He pulled out his phone and showed Victoria the screen. It was a news article dated that morning. "Sterling Industries under federal investigation for tax evasion and fraud." Victoria's face went from white to green. "That's impossible," she stammered. "My father would never." "Your father has been cooking the books for years," James said calmly. "I've known about it for months. I was hoping you weren't involved, but your behavior tonight tells me everything I need to know about your moral compass." The crowd was in complete chaos now. Security guards were trying to maintain order as guests pushed forward to hear better, to record more, to be part of what was clearly going to be the biggest corporate scandal of the year. Flashbulbs were going off constantly, and I could hear reporters dictating stories to their editors over the phone. Victoria's world was collapsing in real time, and everyone could see it happening. "Tonight I want to save yours with mine. Will you give me a chance to prove that love isn't about what we have, but about who we choose to be?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything I'd ever believed about my place in the world. Around us, 200 of the most powerful people in the city waited for my answer. Victoria stood frozen in her designer gown, her carefully planned future crumbling around her feet. And James, billionaire CEO James Morrison, stood before me offering not just love, but a complete transformation of everything I thought possible. I thought about my daughter Lily, asleep at home with the babysitter, dreaming of a future where anything was possible. I thought about the woman I'd been an hour ago, invisible, struggling, convinced that people like me didn't get fairy tale endings. And I thought about the choice between cynicism and hope, between accepting limitations and believing in transformation. "Yes," I whispered, and then louder so everyone could hear. "Yes." The ballroom erupted in applause and cheers. James stepped forward and gently cupped my face, careful of my injured lip. When he kissed me, it was soft and sweet and filled with 4 years of waiting, and wondering and hoping. The crowd went wild, phones capturing every moment of what would become one of the most viral videos of the year. Victoria let out a scream of rage and frustration that cut through the celebration like a knife. "This isn't over," she shrieked. "I'll destroy you both. I'll make sure everyone knows what a fraud this is." But her words were lost in the chaos of celebration around us. Security was already moving toward her, and I could see board members distancing themselves from the woman who had just become a liability. 6 months later, I was standing in that same ballroom, but everything had changed. The Morrison Industries charity gala was in full swing, but this time I wasn't hiding in the shadows. I was the guest of honor. The Emma Martinez Foundation had just announced its first round of grants. 50 full scholarships for single mothers pursuing higher education, 20 small business loans for women starting their own companies, and a mentorship program connecting successful professionals with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. James found me by the windows where we'd first really talked, looking out at the city lights that no longer seemed impossibly distant. "Any regrets?" he asked, slipping his arms around my waist. I leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. "Only that it took us 4 years to find each other again," I said. The investigation into Sterling Industries had revealed corruption that went back decades. Victoria had fled the country before charges could be filed, last spotted in Monaco trying to convince wealthy expatriates that she was the victim of an elaborate corporate conspiracy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who had built her identity around inherited privilege had lost everything through her own choices. I learned something that night. I told James as we watched the city sparkle below us. I learned that kindness isn't just about helping others. It's about recognizing our own worth. When we treat people with dignity and respect, we're affirming that everyone deserves those things, including ourselves. He kissed the top of my head, and I could feel him smiling. And I learned that the most important investments aren't in stocks or real estate. They're in the moments when we choose to be better than we have to be. The gala continued around us. But for a moment, we were alone with the truth that had brought us together. That a single act of kindness can change everything. That love doesn't care about bank accounts or zip codes. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply see someone else's humanity and choose to honor it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.